Can the king be used in a blockade? Have you ever thought about how your king can play a more active role in your chess game? Today, we are discussing whether the king can be used in blockades. Blockades are all about stopping your opponent's pawns from advancing, especially in the endgame. While knights, bishops, and rooks are often the go-to pieces for this task, the king can step up in certain situations. In the endgame, the king becomes a powerful piece. It can block an opponent's passed pawn by standing right in front of it. This is particularly important when the pawn is close to promoting. For example, if you have a king on e5 and your opponent has a pawn on e6, your king can stop that pawn from moving forward. This can be a game changer, especially if that pawn is about to become a queen. However, using the king for blockades requires careful thought. Unlike other pieces, the king is vulnerable to checks and attacks. So, it is best to use the king for blockades when your opponent does not have strong pieces left to threaten it. If your opponent has a rook or queen, your king could be in danger while trying to block a pawn. Another thing to keep in mind is that king blockades are often temporary. The king might only hold off a pawn until other pieces can come to help. For instance, if your king is blocking a pawn on d6, having a pawn on e4 can support your king and make it harder for your opponent to break through. When you think about practical applications, imagine a scenario where your king is actively blocking a pawn. If your opponent has a passed pawn, stopping it from promoting can be vital. But if they still have major pieces on the board, your king might not be safe. The king's limited movement can also be a drawback. It cannot block multiple pawns at once as effectively as a knight or bishop can. If the situation changes, the king may not be able to retreat quickly. Therefore, it is essential to ensure that the blockade fits into your overall endgame strategy. In summary, while the king is not the first choice for blockades in most parts of the game, it becomes more useful in the endgame. Using the king effectively requires timing, awareness of threats, and coordination with your other pieces. The king can serve as both a defensive anchor and an active player in the final stages of the game.